Welcome to TypeScript FM, the friendly podcast for TypeScript developers where we bring you news, updates, and interviews from the community with plenty of tomfoolery sprinkled in. I'm your host, Kamran Ayub, and I'm joined by my co-host and best bud, Eric Onerheim. Together, we're the two TypeScript fools. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Welcome. It's news for the week of May 26, 2025.
The best week.
It's the best week. It's the first week in June right now as we're recording, and I'm feeling better than last week.
Oh, that's good. Why?
I have been sleeping a lot.
Well, that's good. Sleep is always a good thing.
Yeah, I think you sent me a note this morning, and I was still asleep.
Mm-hmm. Just trying to recover from that big NDC trip, huh?
Yeah, I think that, and my daughter is back at 5 a.m.s again, so that's real special.
No, that doesn't sound like fun. What's new with you?
Doom Dark Ages has come out, and I'm not playing it, but I am watching everyone else play it, as is my tradition. I watch everyone else play video games, and I am enjoying it thoroughly. Like, Doom Dark Ages, I'm enjoying watching people play it. That's a lot of fun. Yeah.
I have a game tracking app, so I knew that it came out. It's also on Xbox Game Pass, so if you've got Game Pass, you can just play it right now. I'm playing Expedition 33, so I don't want to start a new game, but it's definitely on my list.
Yeah, I will watch you play it, because I enjoyed the first remake of Doom, I think Doom Eternal, and it was awesome. I played the crap out of that game.
Yeah, I agree. I played I don't know if it was Doom Eternal. It was whatever the new modern one that originally came out. I think it was a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I played that end to end, and that was a lot of fun. So,
yeah, it was a run and gun, super fast paced. Mm-hmm. Exactly kind of what I want out of a Doom game.
Yes, exactly.
I've been working on Excalibur this last weekend. I've got a bunch of browser extension updates to ship to the Chrome Web Store and to the Mozilla add-on deal. A couple contributors added a few features that haven't shipped yet, and notably there's going to be a physics tab, which is going to be really cool.
Ooh. And
a whole bunch of bug fixes that come from me not knowing how to develop browser extensions, so that's nice. And then our contributors added a switch to Vite build, so for Excalibur.
Yeah, we're migrating to Vite.
Yeah, this will improve our life by double-digit percentages because we wait for that Webpack build for a good minute and a half.
Yes, and we have some Vite news also that we're going to get into today. But we did a little bit of a discussion of should we use TS down? Should we use Rolldown? Should we just use Vite? And since Vite is going to be integrating Rolldown pretty shortly, we're just going to get Rolldown for free once we migrate to Vite. Plus, we use vtest to do the whole test suite. So the fact that vtest can just read your Vite config and you can just have a single unified config just makes a lot of sense. So we're going to be merging in Vite 6, and then once 7 drops, we'll just do the upgrade. So I think that'll be super fun.
Yeah, it's super great. And we also have a new graph module coming in for doing pathfinding and doing graph traversal algorithms for
that's cool.
Traditional AI, nav meshes, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because that's always been custom in the past, right? We've always had to write that ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I think I've written A* at least 3 or 4 times. Yeah, what's up with you?
I've just been heads down on my course this past week because it's due this week. But my app is approved on iOS, so I got it end-to-end from when I started this course. It was in Windows Phone, and I ported it to .NET MAUI, added some features, and went all the way through the App Store process, and it is now live on the iOS App Store and should be on Google Play soon too. It's in review right now for the production track, but it's coming, so that's pretty sweet. So I'm really happy to be done with that course. I should finish up this week. TypeScript FM is sponsored by Excalibur.js, the friendly TypeScript game engine for the web. Like many of you, I got into computers because I loved video games and dreamed of making one, but game development always felt a bit intimidating,
Instead, I built a career in web development, though that dream of making games never really went away. Then I met Eric, who showed me I could use my HTML, CSS, and JavaScript skills to create games with just a bit of game design knowledge and the right engine. Excalibur.js makes game development approachable, offering everything you need to build 2D web games. Arcade physics, sprites, animations, input support, and integrations with tools like Tiled and Sprite. It's beginner-friendly, yet flexible enough to grow with you. Our team has published 10 games using Excalibur, all written in TypeScript. If you're a web developer looking to dip your toes into game dev or sharpen your TypeScript skills, give Excalibur.js a try at excalibur.js.com. Click the big tutorial button to start building your first game, Excalibur, a Flappy Bird clone. After that, join our friendly Discord community of web developers who love to help each other and share game dev tips.
Should we get into some of the news?
Yeah, let's get into the news. The big thing in the Angular scene is Angular 20 is out, which has kind of just a boring update. It's kind of boring, but it's boring in a good way. They're stabilizing a lot of the new reactivity features. So this is like their signal, their computed, their input. They're also announcing effect, linked signal, and toSignal are stable as well. So a lot of these like signal-based reactivity models are becoming stable now. Another thing that's really big in this release is they are adding zoneless to developer preview. And if you're not familiar with Angular, they use this thing called Zone.js. And it's basically a big spy on the DOM and browser APIs to watch if you call into any of those APIs. And this is because Angular has no other way of detecting whether or not you've called into a side effect somewhere that it can't track. React and other React likes do something different, like with use effect or like with a hook. And Angular is more imperative, so they need to spy on things. So I'm not sure how they're providing zoneless change detection. I'll have to look into that later. But this will be huge because adding Zone.js onto your page is kind of like a big lift.
Well, it sounds like Angular 20 is all about the developer experience with a lot of like some experimental features that they added, and then a big focus on improving API surface and stuff like that.
Yeah. One other thing that I forgot to mention is they are also polishing up their server-side rendering features. They have incremental hydration and route level rendering. So those are both promoted to stable as well.
Cool.
Like if you felt like you were missing out on the server-side rendering, don't, because now that's a thing that they have.
Yeah, I like seeing all this server-side rendering stuff. It's sort of back to basics, isn't it?
Yeah.
We used to start on the server, then we went to the client, and we're like, that's too much client. Now we got to go back up to the server.
The pendulum swings. I think when we started doing Razor with ASP.NET, it was all server-side rendering. Yeah, it was. Yep. And now we're back. We're back again. Yep. I really like. Yeah, I like this trend, and I like how some of the libraries do it, like Astro, where you can say like this little island is client side, but the rest is all server side. So it's nice. And speaking of meta frameworks like Astro, do you remember Remix? I do remember Remix. They made a big splash a few years ago. Yes, they did. So that was by the React Router team, and then I believe they are now, as they're part of Shopify. But Remix has been kind of sleeping for a little while. They've been working on React Router, and what they actually did is they took a lot of the stuff that was in Remix and they put it into React Router v7. So React Router v7 essentially is going to be taking the place of Remix. So the team wrote a blog post called Wake Up Remix, and they describe where Remix version 3 is going to go. It's basically going to go in an entirely different direction. It's going to be built on Preact instead of React, and they don't have anything to preview yet. It was more of like a, hey, what's going on with Remix type of deal. But basically they said, like, if you have really liked Remix, you're going to love React Router because that has everything in it. It's got loaders, it's got React Server component support, and all of that stuff. So they've decided that, hey, we can just start brand new and we can start from scratch and we can build something that we really want to build that goes in a different direction. So you can look forward to that. They said they're going to be attending their Remix Jam conference or virtual conference thing. So if you want to attend that, you can kind of see what they're up to. Nice. Next up, Evan Yu just announced in a blog post Rolldown Vite, which is a developer preview of Vite, but with their new Rust-powered Rolldown instead of Rollup inside of Vite. So this is supposed to be a drop-in replacement for Vite, so you can start trying this now and replace it, in theory, just wholesale.
Yes, and we mentioned this in the last episode, but at that point it was still in beta. Now it's in technical preview, and it has 100% feature parity with Vite. So that's why you can take it, you can install the new package, which is a different package name for now until they are ready to integrate it back into Vite, and you can test it with your apps. So that's super exciting. There's a lot of cool stuff happening in Void Zero where they're kind of unifying the architecture for a lot of the tools that they're building.
Yeah, and what this means is that ESBuild is no longer required. Mm-hmm. Instead, all of the things that are transformed and minified are handled by Rolldown and, by extension, Oxc. You don't need to install ESBuild unless you really, really, really want to. So, like, if there's something that explicitly requires ESBuild, you can install that. Mm-hmm. But the idea here is that you'll have that consistent experience with the same speed that you want out of Vite.
Yeah, very, very exciting. Some more meta framework news. I was just talking about Astro, and they just put out a blog post that was What's New in Astro, May 2025. And we kind of already covered the Astro 5.8 release, but the blog post contains tons of community stuff in there. So if you want some more learning resources, if you want to see what the team has been up to and all that kind of stuff, there's it's kind of a fun little celebration blog post in there. So definitely check that out.
You know what? It's finally happening. Temporal is shipping in a browser.
What?
In Firefox 139. Wait is over. It feels like Fusion. Fusion is here, but there was a really funny tweet from Wes Boss that I'll include. It's been years. And, what's really funny about it is there was a community contributor to Firefox that implemented the temporal feature. It wasn't the Firefox devs. It was André Bargol. And there's a SpiderMonkey blog post about shipping temporal, giving lots of mad props to André. And Matt Pocock also has some coverage of this. I'll include a link to his YouTube video as well. But this is huge because this means the other browsers are sure to follow quickly now that it's in Firefox.
Yeah. Do you want to take a step back and explain to people what is the Temporal API? Because it has been so many years, probably people forgot about it.
This is great. If you have used the JavaScript date, it's bad.
Yes.
And it's
Agreed.
Because it's based on the Java date, which is also bad.
Mm-hmm.
The idea behind this is that the old date in JavaScript is a date and a time, which causes a lot of problems. So Temporal adds an API for you to treat things as just dates, as just times, or if you do need a date and time, you can do that. You can combine those two concepts. So like if you're in the Java sphere, Jota time is the way to do it. And if you look at Temporal, it's very much inspired by that. And if you're in the .NET space, Node time is that ported to .NET. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing time in .NET, that's the way to do it, in my opinion. Temporal is very much inspired by that. So they take a very like single responsibility focus to date and time to try and detangle it. And it's a nice way of working with dates and times. And they've added a lot of stuff so that you don't need things like moment, or you need things like these other things to do time calculation or date calculations or date time calculations. They also have different calendar systems. So like if you were working in a Gregorian calendar, like most of us are, but if you're working in a different calendaring system, they support those.
Yeah, I would like to point people to the Node 24 episode. I created a GitHub repo where I have some of the code snippets for some of the new features. One of those new V8 features was duration format, or I think it's the International API duration format. What's cool about Temporal is that duration format doesn't actually create a duration, it just formats it. But the Temporal API allows you to create a duration instance, and then you can just pass that to International duration format, and now you've got a formatted duration. So the APIs work really well together, and I'm just kind of excited because Moment and some of those other date libraries, they add a lot to your bundle. So if we can get both the browsers and the runtimes to all support Temporal, I mean, that's a dependency that you may not need. That would be huge.
Yeah, one thing that is maybe not super clear is that time zones are like a super painful aspect of this. So like if you had Moment or you had another datetime library, you would have to pull in the time zone database with it for the locales that you were working in. And that was a huge part of the bundle. So like that's another aspect of this that is super huge. And you can also work in dates and times that are zoneless. So you can work on them without a time zone or with a time zone.
Right. That's like the instant of time, which is what Node.time calls it, or like the moment of time and moment. It's like it doesn't. Exactly. It's just, I don't know how to describe it except that it is a point in time that is irrespective of where you are in the world or time and space.
Right. Yeah. It's like a point in time on the planet Earth.
Yes.
So regardless of whatever time zone you're in. So that's the way to think about it. And it's an implementation detail, but it's like a canonical measurement of time that is the same everywhere.
Yeah, it's great for comparisons. Or in my case, when you want to notify people when their games are coming out and they live in different time zones and the game comes out in a specific time zone, it's a great way to make sure that there's no weird time zone math that you got to do.
Exactly. I have an old video where I talk about Temporal. I'll need to dig that up and publish it.
Yeah, you should include that. That'd be cool. All right. The last thing is more of a PSA, and that is to take the Stack Overflow 2025 Developer Survey. It's open. So this happens annually, and it is kind of an industry standard for doing research on, what developers are up to. So you definitely want to go take that if you can. I don't know if they allow you to write in, different stuff for like what podcasts you listen to, but you could write us in if you want to. Just saying.
Yeah. TypeScript FM.
But anyway, it doesn't matter. Just take it. Let the world know what you're up to. I think it'll be pretty fun to see if TypeScript has changed rank, if it's gone up, if it's gone down, what the state of the world is in. That'd be kind of cool to know. Excellent. We've got some community highlights, quite a bit. Friend of the show, Josh Goldberg, was just at JS Nation 2025, and he just gave a talk called Types Beyond TypeScript, and I looked at the slides because the recording is not quite up yet, but maybe by the time this comes out it will be. But I just wanted to quote, he has a very quotable quote on one of his slides, and he says, "Complex types result from complex code. Prefer simpler code resulting in simpler types." I like
nice.
that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And types in TypeScript are part of the API, and it's kind of tough to maneuver your head that way, but it's super easy to break your types API as well. So that's one thing to keep thinking about in TypeScript.
Yes. Hamilton Green had a Blue Sky, he posted on Blue Sky, but he wrote a blog post where he compared the performance of treating errors as values rather than throwing new error, like inside of a catch block, or anytime you want to throw an error, usually we do like throw new error object and then you pass in whatever the message is or whatever the object is. But what it actually shows is that it's up to like 300 times faster. So if you're doing that in a tight loop or you have a performance concern there with throwing errors, I think you want to check out his little blog post where he benchmarks that. Again, caveat with benchmarks, it's a micro benchmark. You should actually measure what it is like inside of your own code base at runtime, but it's kind of an interesting little statistic. Cool. We've got another library watch. We've actually got several library watches. Let's see if I can do them all kind of at once. JSON-U, who we mentioned on the show before, just released a new tool called ts-migrating. It is a tool that helps teams migrate their code base to modern TSConfig settings incrementally, which means that you essentially leave little comments in your code base that say, I want to use my original version of the tsconfig so that it doesn't throw an error, but in this part of the code, I want to change my syntax to meet the new modern tsconfig settings I have, and it will work. And his tool actually is a language server plugin. So it doesn't require any like extra tools. It just plugs into the language server, and it almost does, if you imagine like a railroad switch, it basically switches the tracks to, well, you want your modern tsconfig here, or do you want your legacy tsconfig here? And I think this is a really cool tool to migrate really big code bases if you've got a team. We will do a deep dive into this because I invited Jason onto the show, and he accepted. So we will talk more about that coming soon. Another library that I saw on Reddit is jsonv-ts. This is another schema validator library, and it's specific to JSON. So you might be wondering what's the difference between like Zod or archetype or typebox. And the author says, I've recently published jsonv-ts as an alternative to other validation libraries, but with the primary focus on building and validating JSON schemas. You'll get a Zod-like API to build type-safe JSON schemas with a built-in validator. And since it produces clean JSON schemas, you can get any spec-compliant validator. So I think it's very focused on like the JSON validation there and creating schemas. The other library to watch that just got released is called ts-argparse. It's basically a CLI arg parser for TypeScript with a focus on type safety. And if you go check out the Reddit thread, a few commenters added some other libraries that also do type-safe CLI parsing, so you might want to take a look at that as well.
Awesome. I have some fun blog posts. I have a TypeScripting, the technical interview, which is a comedic fiction about writing the N-Queen's solution in the TypeScript type system. It's very funny. It's got a little Nordic flair. It's by Richard Towers. I included a link to it. It's a giggle, but it's actually surprisingly low amount of TypeScript code, TypeScript type code, not just TypeScript code, but TypeScript types code to solve the N-Queen's problem, which I thought was really funny.
Nice.
Next up, for your Angular fans, there's an Angular CanIUse. You know what? There's been 20 versions of Angular. It turns out keeping track of what features you can use and what is tough. And this is by the angular.courses people. So they have an Angular CanIUse, which is super useful for me in my day job. And I use Angular every day.
That's cool.
Next up is a great video. I watched this last week, but it's from Web Dev Simplified. It's how to handle internationalization like a senior dev. And it's how to do it strongly typed. And this is great because most of the time when I work with like an I18N library, it's all very stringly typed. So it's very easy to accidentally mistype a key and just get like a default internationalization and not realize it until you're like trying to like localize to Spanish and you're like, wait a second, this is an English word. This is not working. So this is super cool. It's strongly typed. It's using as const as you might expect. So it'll throw if you give it a key that is not like valid in your translation file. So it's pretty cool.
That's nice.
There's also, I know we're kind of Deno fans here, but there is a new video from JavaScript conferences by Git Nation with the Deno DevRel talking about the different features that Deno might have that you might be missing. So it's, if you've listened to this podcast, you've probably heard us go over all of these features before, but if you haven't, it might be a good video to watch.
Nice. That's really cool. There's a sort of a fun little blog post. Now, you know about Doom written in TypeScript types. Obviously, we did a full deep dive into that. But Scary.me on Blue Sky wrote a language called TLTSS, which is another language written in TypeScript types. So they show like a literal string with like function code, and then when they hover over the output of the type, it's the calculated output of running the function. So they kind of go into some detail about how did we get here? So I think that is kind of a very fun sort of technical blog post that I'm sure many people will find enjoy.
Yeah, that's wild. People like going pretty wild with the TypeScript types because they are Turing complete. So you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. That's right. Cool. I just wanted to sort of end the community section on kind of a fun little micro discussion here. So James Snell is on the technical steering committee for Node, and he recently posted a thread on Blue Sky, which I thought was really nice. But basically, he posed the question, are Deno, Bun, and Node.js competing with each other? And his proposition was no, that they're not. They're not competing because Node is a foundation, so it doesn't really matter what Deno and Bun are doing because Node is not really trying to, steal users away from Deno or Bun. You can use whatever makes you happy. And I totally agreed with the overall sentiment of you should just use whichever one solves your problem and solves it the best way. But I replied and I said, using the word competing, I think technically, they are competing, but it's not really in the way that we traditionally think of the word competition. And this is something that I learned from Simon Wardley, who created Wardley mapping. He was the CTO of Ubuntu. He's a really smart guy. You should go read his book. But in there, he talks about how the evolution of different components, which includes technology and stuff like that, they evolve through competition, but the original word competition comes from the Latin root, which means to strive with or together. So you can compete with something, and there doesn't have to be a rivalry. A rivalry is a type of competition, but so is cooperation, and so is collaboration, which kind of explains why an open source library can compete with another open source library, but they're not rivals. But they still do evolve together. They co-evolve. Simon calls it co-evolution of practice, but I think that's what we do see with Deno, Bun, and Node.js. There is a co-evolution of practice, meaning that when Bun adds a new feature, then Deno might get it, or when Deno adds a new feature, then Bun gets it, or when Deno brings TypeScript to the foreground, then Node.js integrates TypeScript. So I think that they might not be rivals with each other. Maybe Deno and Bun are, but I would say that Deno and Bun probably are not really rivals to Node.js. It's more of a cooperation. And I don't know what you think, Eric, but I think for a collaboration, my definition would be Ryan and Jared, who both run Deno and Bun respectively, would be actually part of the technical steering committee of Node. And that way you could say that they would be collaborating. But since they're not, then I would just say they're probably cooperating, where they're not actively rivaling each other. They're not in conflict with each other, but they're just sort of coexisting and co-evolving at the same time. So that's cooperation.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also feel like there's some asymmetric competition happening. Deno is innovating in places that Node isn't going to. Right. Or, Bun is innovating in places where Deno and Node might not. So there's asymmetric competition. I think they're trying to carve out a different niche, perhaps.
Yeah, this is the hard part, is that it's possible that the executives, the founders of Deno and Bun, they might see themselves as competing in rivalry with Node.js, but obviously, from Node.js's perspective, they are not in rivalry, but they are competing. So for them, Ryan might be saying, he might be staying up at night, keeping himself up at night, being how can I take over Node? I don't know if that's what he's saying, but if he is, then he's looking at it from the perspective of I'm in rivalry with Node.js. But anyway, I just thought it's kind of a nice way to think about competition in this wider definition, because Simon Wardley is if you recognize that, and then you think originally, why am I in rivalry with this other thing, this other alternative? Could I collaborate instead, or could I cooperate instead? So there's the three different approaches to competing that might change your strategy with how you work in the marketplace. But anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Definitely. I hadn't thought about that in that focus before, but that is very interesting.
Yeah.
It's definitely as I'm looking at my own prospects, my own business, it's a thought-provoking exercise to see okay, who are you competing with? Are you collaborating? Are you competing? Are you, and how does that affect your strategy?
Yeah, I think we live in a market-based society, so we've been tuned and trained to think of competition as only a zero-sum game, but it's not always a zero-sum game. And you can find examples of different companies that are in the same, industry, or they might even serve the same audience, but they collaborate with each other. It's actually a really common practice inside of consulting and offering professional services, where you might just refer someone to someone else that, serves your same customer in a different way. That would be an example of like collaboration or cooperation. Cool. We've got some cool links. I've been on a David Macaulay kick lately. I don't know if anyone remembers the original The Way Things Work Windows 3.1 game, but I used to play that as a kid, and oh man, it was so fun. And I was just fantasizing on Blue Sky why DK Multimedia hasn't like rebooted that for the modern day, because you would think that with iPads and stuff and kids, like, it would be an amazing experience, I think, for modern day kids to like play with that on their iPad, because I was bringing it up on my PC, and I'll include a link to Classic Reload where you can it gets emulated on the PC through DOSBox, so you can play it in your web browser with sound and everything, and with mouse and keyboard. My kids were just like clicking around and going through everything just like I did when I was a kid, and they were really enjoying it. And I was just thinking to myself, man, this would be so cool on like an iPad. It doesn't work in Safari, but I tried it, but it does work on your PC. And then similarly at the library, my wife just got a David Macaulay book. It was written in 1979. It's called The Motel of the Mysteries. And if you imagine, it is a commentary on archaeology, basically like how we interpret things that came a long time before us. So the joke is sort of that it's an alternate future where the country of USA, which is USA, but USA is like in rubble and ruins, and this guy falls down, like he falls down and he lands in this area where there's like this door that opens to somewhere, and it's a hotel, but obviously he doesn't know that, and it's David Macaulay's drawings, right? So he like draws the toilet seat, and it says like mantle of blah blah blah, like you wear it around your neck. Or it has, it just shows a picture of like a toilet, and it's like a totally different interpretation of what the toilet is, or things like that. It's really, really funny. So highly recommend any of David Macaulay's work. And he has other books too, one called Castle, one called Toilet, which explains how toilets work, and all sorts of stuff. But he's a treasure.
Yeah. I've got some cool links too. Dan Abramov put out a post called Progressive JSON. And this is kind of in the same vein of his other series where he's explaining a lot of the core innovations of React server components, where they kind of adopted a novel approach of streaming JSON. So it's definitely a post to take a look at, and it's really cool. I'm not going to go into detail, but he's got a great video on it. I'll link in the show notes, and it's got a blog post of the same name.
Yeah, if you do find the Blue Sky thread, there's some folks who posted other libraries that support progressive streaming of JSON in case you want to implement it or something.
Yeah. And if you have, it might be a thing to look at if you have like a very data heavy application and you don't want to try and like sit and wait for that entire like data to download. Like in the past, I think you might have worked on it with me, maybe not. I worked on a hybrid iPad application that downloaded like megabytes of JSON, and it was all like reporting data for like business analysts. So, there could have been a use for this at the time if we had thought of and implemented progressive JSON, but we did not. Another one that's kind of neat is from Blue Sky user Ian Langworth as a curated list of data grid components. So if you have a need to do data grids, he's got a big list of their pros and cons and what they support and what they don't.
Yeah, it's not just AG grid.
Did you know there's more than just AG grid?
Yeah. This is great because I actually want to know this so that I can use some maybe in my app.
Another thing that's kind of cool that I thought was kind of funny is a library called Bippy, and it's kind of got the Elmo and Fire as their logo, but it allows you to hack into React internals. And they have a huge, giant warning at the top of the README. This project may break production apps and cause unexpected behavior.
That's funny.
It allows you to peer into React internals by pretending to be the React dev tools. So you can dig into like React fibers and see like props, like raw props and state and context, and you can kind of peer in and, do things that maybe you shouldn't.
That's funny.
But it's super cool. I mean, I think it's instructive, certainly, to take a look at it. But yeah, it's if you want to go see what's going on inside of React, this is a cool library to go take a look at that. I would not ship it to production. And then another one that was really cool is on the WooCache podcast. Again, he had Inigo Quiles, who is a legend in the computer graphics world, and they interview him, and it's very interesting, his take on computer graphics and his approach to computer graphics. He's coming up from the demo scene, so he definitely, that colored his way of doing computer graphics, which is like a lot of it's just mathematics, is instead of drawing with like meshes, drawing with mathematics, which is really cool.
That's cool.
And he worked at Pixar, and he worked at, I think he works now at Adobe, but he worked in a lot of these companies that like were pioneering in the graphics industry. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And speaking of graphics, if you want to learn how graphics works, Sebastian League has a new banger video where he builds a software rasterizer, which is like, no GPU, we're going to build a graphics pipeline on the CPU. And he goes through it step by step and explains a lot of the math in kind of a way where you can intuit why it's the way it is, with a very geometric explanation for everything, which I thought was really enlightening, because there were a few things where I was like, oh, I just took this matrix as a given. I didn't think to question why we assembled it this way. So it's really like from first principles, let's build a software rasterizer. It was really cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Love it. Hey, you know what? Before we say goodbye today, I did come up with a dad joke this weekend, and I would leave it to the end so that people can just turn off their podcast player and don't have to listen to it. But I have one for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What is Scooby-Doo's favorite programming language?
Ruby, Ruby, Roo! Oh, God. That's awesome.
So anyway, I came up with that myself. I'm sure someone has before, but I thought of it this weekend. So it was anyway. All right, that's enough. You can turn it off now. See ya.
See you next week.
Hi everyone, this is Kamran. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see the show notes, you can check your podcast player or go to typescript.fm, where you'll see a list of all the episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and please rate it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that's how the show grows and gets discovered by more people. If you want to suggest news or a project that should be covered, or just want to say hi, email us at feedback@typescript.fm. If you want to follow us on social, we're both active on Blue Sky. I'm at comronicus.com, and Eric is at ericonerheim.com. You can also follow the show directly at typescript.fm.